It was about a year ago today. I was walking through a crowded street market in Mexico in the blistering heat of the afternoon when I stumbled on an odd sight. A whole table full of greeting cards laid out in a grid. But they were poorly Xeroxed and said things like rock, reggaeton, and the Beatles. Turns out they weren't greeting cards. They were actually little packages with USB drives, each containing thousands of bootleg songs. I bought one labeled Cumbia, a genre of music I just so happened to be researching for a video. And I was happy to find that, after loading it into a burner Chromebook, it did indeed contain thousands of poorly organized MP3s. As time passed, I thought more and more about the flash drives I left behind. A few people had posted about them on Reddit, but it wasn't nearly enough to quench my curiosity. So 1 year later, I was back in Mexico, determined to find that same vendor once again. This wasn't going to be easy. The street market was massive, easily stretching dozens of blocks with thousands of different vendors. There was kitchenware, clothing, and religious figurines, cornbread, tejuino, and counterfeit Casio watches. It was hot, and our phones were getting air quality alerts. 2 hours in, and I was beginning to worry. It felt like I was searching for a needle in a haystack. But, a vinyl booth. We must be getting closer. And sure enough, just a few steps further, and voila. It was just how I remembered it. A table so full of music, it would make Steve Jobs dumbstruck. 1,000 songs in your pocket, try 500,000. There was a compilation of metal bands, from Led Zeppelin to Korn. There was a hip-hop compilation as well, rock and Espanol, entire bootleg discographies of Latin artists. There was music for drunks, music for taxi drivers, this strange-looking TikTok compilation. I was frankly overwhelmed. I didn't know where to start. I told the vendor in broken Spanish that I was a music writer and looking for something unique.
¿Tienes una recomendación?
No sé qué música es
No.
como para escritor, no.
As I would later realize, these same exact packages were sold at other markets around the city. So the man here was probably not the one who created them. He most likely picked them up from a wholesaler and resold them for a quick buck.
¿Y cuánto cuestan?
120.
120.
¿Te gusta?
¿Puedes hacer 3 por 300?
Sí, la llevas 3.
Quiero...
So I ended up choosing that metal rock compilation. Coridos, because it seemed like some intense music. And TikTok, because, well, I was curious. And after chatting a bit more, the vendor did eventually make a recommendation.
¿Te gustan norteñas?
No conozco.
He took the USB stick out to play me a sample. Also an important step, to show the flash drive does indeed contain the music you're paying for. So with that, I paid about $20 and went on my way.
Muchas gracias.
Que te vaya bien.
Igualmente.
As luck would have it, around the corner, there was another vendor selling a totally different set of flash drives, these more poorly Xeroxed. There was also an array of bootleg CDs, including the Beatles and the Bee Gees. But CDs are a lot less exciting to me than flash drives, so let's skip them. I opted for a flash drive of 60s rock from Mexico. I had heard some pretty wild psych rock previously on this trip, and this drive promised to contain video in addition to music. Needless to say, they got me. Finally back home, I just needed to run a quick virus scan first, crossing my fingers that I did indeed just buy music, and not... There was about 12,000 MP3s to scan between these 5 drives. That meant there was about 700 hours worth of music, or 29 days if I never stopped. Regrettably, I wasn't going to be able to do that. But I am going to take a solid look and show you guys what's on them. I decided to start with the flash drive that was most familiar to me, the Metal Rock compilation. Right off the bat, I love this combination of artists. AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Metallica, sure, they make sense. But then Korn, Marilyn Manson, and Rammstein? It's not exactly the Mount Rushmore of metal bands. It's more like what you'd find in a Hot Topic circa 2005. The drive was pleasantly well organized. The first folder was a best of mix, so if you plugged this thing directly into a stereo, you'd get a nice blend of artists. The folders for each band, however, were not. Songs were not separated by album or track listing, nor was there ID3 data. There were outtakes and live versions mixed in with the studio tracks. The System of a Down folder had a song called Legend of Zelda.
Link, come to town, come to save the Princess Zelda.
It turns out this was one of those classic Napster hoaxes. It was actually made by a band called The Rabbit Joint, who, in fairness, did sound a lot like Surge. At the very bottom was a folder called Brutal Metal, and it had bands like Children of Bodom and Gorefest. Within it was another folder called Black Metal, and it had about 75 unlabeled tracks, although these at least had ID3 data. I have to say, I was impressed by the variety of music on this thing. They could have just focused on the big names, but somebody made sure there was some decently obscure stuff too. I am a little confused by the inclusion of Oasis, however. Not exactly known for their hard rock anthems. Okay, and next, let's get into the two actually Mexican flash drives. Norteno, which literally translates to northern, is a genre that originated from the northern Mexican states, as well as Texas. It's notable for its strong polka influence that came from German and Central European immigrants in the 1800s. Many norteños are in 3/4 and 2/4 time, and they feature that distinct polka bass line. Corridos, on the other hand, aren't so much a genre as they are a type of song. It's a song that tells a story. Verses can be long and winding, with less emphasis on danceability. Corridos were traditionally written about historical figures like war heroes. But in the last few decades, many have shifted to the criminal underworld. Narco corridos is a whole subgenre that deals exclusively with drug smugglers. Narco corridos are controversial in Mexico. Authorities have banned performances here and there, and largely kept the music off the radio. However, across the border, in say Los Angeles, it thrives. It's a bit amusing to think that, as a gringo, you might be sitting in a taqueria, listening to what you think is a pleasant Mexican folk song, when what you're actually hearing is... That's not to say every corrido is about drugs. That's certainly not the case.
Ya no llores, corazón, no seas cobarde.
But on this particular flash drive, okay, let's try an experiment. I'll pick out a few songs completely at random, and let's just see what happens.
Una orden por el WhatsApp, directamente del jefe, se cumple sin cuestionarse.
Recuerdos malos y otros gratos de mi infancia.
Listo para darles guerra, sin temor a los vergazos. M16 sin cuernos, 50 y granada.
Ando en el espacio porque me gusta estar bien gris. No van a
Now, the Norteno flash drive was, by and large, much more lighthearted. The cover art declared party animals and drunks. But from what I could tell, most of the songs seemed to be about the latter, singers turning to the bottle after a love was lost. It actually shares a lot in common with old school honky-tonk music, and this has given me something of a fresh appreciation.
An empty bottle, a broken heart, and you're still on my mind.
Okay guys, just a heads up, I need to keep the lights on somehow, so the rest of this video is going to shift to Patreon. There's a link below, head over there and you'll get to see the exciting conclusion. Do it.